I will not front. I also picked the Clippers to win the championship, so you're my partner. Can't leave you hanging out to dry. I'll take this walk of shame with you. That was something to watch.
Okay, so this is the first time watching the NBA in my life, 40 years, where the young teams went to the playoffs and rise. Miami's young, Boston's young, Denver's young. Hell, Dallas played great. Phoenix didn't make the playoffs. They were great. And the old teams, Milwaukee was awful, and Houston was awful, and the Clippers have older stars, were awful. Only LeBron and the Lakers as an old team are playing well, and that's probably the power of LeBron and his greatness and leadership. Now, do I think for the next 40 years that old teams will get to the playoffs, the veterans, and they'll shrink, and the young teams will just flourish? No. Do I think the bubble is part of has helped younger players? Yeah, there's no crowds. Young players shrink in the playoffs with the toxicity of crowds. And the old players are married, they got kids, it's getting in their head. That's some of it. But let's not worry about that. Why did the Clippers lose? Okay, Kawhi's overrated. Well, I saw him be the second youngest guy to ever win a MVP in the finals. He beat LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. I don't think he's overrated. I think he's great. Well, Clippers, no good. They were overrated. Well, they were 12-1 pre-bubble when they were healthy, and they gave LeBron and AD and LeBron some problems. Let's make the complicated simple. All of our lives are shaped by our choices. We can blame our parents. We can blame the president. We can blame our neighbor. We can blame our brother-in-law. Guys can blame their wives. Our lives are overwhelmingly shaped by our choices. Kawhi had 3 choices after winning in Toronto. And I want you to just think about these. Number 1, stay in Toronto. Great general manager, great head coach, very good roster, 2 emerging stars, Van Vliet, Pascal Siakam. There would be no pressure. They won a title. There's no pressure. It's in the East, which is easier than the West. Again, the structure, the fans, the GM, the coach, the veterans, emerging stars, no pressure. You already won a title. He could have chosen that. He did not. His second choice was, let's go to the Lakers. Massive brand. Join LeBron. Anthony Davis was already there. There's no brand pressure. They got banners all over the place. It's the biggest game in town. LeBron would be the star. AD would be the 2. And you could be, as you usually are, quiet, covert, nonverbal, win titles, and do your load management. Nobody would care. He did not choose that. Our life is based on choices. He chose the Clippers that have a history of losing, basically rent the arena seemingly from the team that owns it, it feels like, even though the Lakers don't. Go to a coach who has struggled in the postseason many times, Doc Rivers, and with a teammate, Paul George, who has a history of shrinking. And a franchise, the Clippers, who have a history of shrinking. That was the choice. And it should be noted, San Antonio, Kawhi wasn't responsible for building chemistry because they had it before he got there. Manu, Tony, Tim. Toronto, he wasn't responsible for building chemistry. They'd been number 1 seed the previous year. They had good chemistry. But in Los Angeles with the Clippers, Kawhi was to a large degree, because they had to give up some pieces to get Paul and Kawhi, he was responsible for building this chemistry. He's not a real talker. He's not real communicative. He's not real verbal. And isn't, in the end of it all, a chemistry issue? I watched last night. Bad shots. The Clippers didn't have a lot of good open looks. When they did, they didn't hit them. Denver was fast and fluid, and they just got great open looks, layups and dunks and open looks. It's like a young team that had been playing together for a while, and they were confident, and the Clippers looked kind of static, and they were tight, and they weren't loose, and they weren't getting open shots, and when they did, they weren't hitting them. Maybe it's just as simple as this. Kawhi had 3 choices, and he chose the wrong one. A franchise in the Clippers that historically shrinks, a teammate in Paul George that historically shrinks, and I am a Doc Rivers fan. He's the Joe Torre of the NBA. He's great with veteran players. Wasn't a good series for him. It was not a good series. He had bad second halves and bad fourth quarters. It was not a great series for Doc, and it happens. It happens. Maybe it's just that simple. I don't think Kawhi is overrated. I don't think the Clippers lack talent. I do not believe young teams will now, from this point going forward, dominate the playoffs, and the veteran all-stars will all shrink. Is there a bubble component to some of this story of young teams flourishing? Sure. This is about choices. By the way, Kyrie left LeBron. Bruh, how'd it work out? Paul George stayed in OKC, could have chosen LeBron. How'd that work out? Ty Lue could have coached the Lakers, wanted more money, chose the Clippers. How'd that work out? Sometimes it's as simple as this. Stay with LeBron or choose LeBron. It'll all work out. He'll take all the pressure. He'll take the big shots. He'll take the media criticism. LeBron will just take it all, put it on his shoulders. Bro, come on and join us. It's funny to think now, right? When I say this morning, it sounds so easy. LeBron and AD were already there. We saw what Kevin Durant did. Just go join those guys. And he chose the Clippers. And he chose Paul George. And that's what it looks like. Here's Paul George after the game.
I think internally we've always felt this is not a championship or bust year for us. We can only get better the longer we stay together and the more we're around each other. The more chemistry for this group, the better. I think that's really the tale of the tape of the season. We just didn't have enough time together.
I kind of think it was championship bust. And if it wasn't, because Lou Williams said later he thought it was, and Doc Rivers thought it was, and Kawhi thought he was, and Steve Ballmer thought it was, and the front office, who I text often, thought it was, maybe this is part of the communication issues. Paul George may not be around. Like if you thought this was we got a lot of runway on the tarmac, remember this. This is a Laker town. It is a Dodger town. It is a USC football town. It's becoming an LA Ram town. This is a fight. Steve Ballmer just bought a bunch of land for $1 zillion to build his own arena because he's trying to separate and create his own brand. So it's one thing to lose. It's another to potentially watch the Lakers win a title. That hurts. I mean, if the Lakers were already out and the Clippers lose and you're like, well, okay, Denver Nuggets, the bubble, they win a championship. No, that's not what's going to happen. It's very possible now the biggest roadblock for the Lakers is gone. The Lakers win the championship. That's not going to play well in the building. Paul George may not be long if he's we got a lot of runway here. He didn't look at it as a 1 year. A lot of people in that building, they were already online looking at championship rings. Let me segue to this. Speaking of LeBron James, Nick Wright in 15 minutes will be obnoxious. If you want to turn, go ahead. I'm sure it'll be, whatever. If you want to deal with, watch kind of that kind of nonsense, whatever. Nick Wright will be joining us in 15 minutes, and it's going to be bad for me. The sea is now opening up for LeBron. It's now LeBron James with all sorts of finals and championship experience will be taking on Denver. Just took the binky out of their mouth. Miami and Boston. By the way, the old Lakers just got 6 days rest. Oh, by the way, the Clippers, a roster built to beat LeBron, 4 wing defenders, gone. LeBron's career is actually, when you're honest about it, has been a series of obstacles he's had to overcome. Let's talk about him. He gets drafted by Cleveland. They're awful. Everything's bad. Cleveland stinks. You like to get drafted by great organizations. The Celtics or, Packers. No. Number 2, he walks right into a blizzard called the Big Three in Boston. Not great. Then he ends up facing the Warriors dynasty. That's another obstacle. Oh, by the way, star teammates getting hurt. Bosh was often hobbled. D. Wade in Miami. Kyrie and Kevin Love get hurt. He has to go to a finals with Matthew Dellavedova. And then he's had to deal with flakes. J.R. Smith forgot how to keep score of a game, and Kyrie Irving just bailed because he's Kyrie Irving and the world is flat, according to him. But now it's different. 17 years, and the sea is opening. Now it's young teams. The Clippers are out of the way. They got a break. Denver's a bunch of babies. Now Denver's going to understand what the big difference between, the second round and the Western Conference Finals. There's a lot of difference. That's the difference between the Sun Bowl and the Rose Bowl. There's a big difference. Second round, who was in it last year? Who knows? Who remembers? We remember conference finals. We remember finals. And through all those roadblocks with LeBron, the flakes, guys don't know the score, the injuries, Kyrie, Kevin Love, the big three, the bad ownership, all those roadblocks. 9 finals, 3 titles. And for the first time ever, well-rested LeBron, who, by the way, got hurt last year, didn't play a ton, COVID this year. Think about this. COVID was actually a break for LeBron's legs. Giannis, the Eastern Rim protector. LeBron can struggle with that. Out. Kawhi and the Clippers built to stop LeBron. Out. Anthony Davis, who has a history of being injured, is finally healthy. D. Wade and Bosh, who never got hurt before LeBron, were all banged up. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, they got hurt. Now it's like Anthony Davis is Mr. Brittle. He's not hurt. The sea is opening up for LeBron. Opponents, health, none of it in his way. This is going to be painful. I had the Clippers, but it's good if LeBron wins for me, right? I'm on that side. So that's where we are this morning.